Minister Hajdu, thanks for taking some time for us. Can you walk us through some of this final agreement's main features?
Well, absolutely. First of all, this is the proposed final agreement worked on over the past 6 months by Canada, the Assembly of First Nations, and of course the council that represents Mashum and Trout class actions. This is the component of the CHRT agreements in principle that deals with the compensation aspect of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal actions, and it will essentially settle the compensation component of those agreements for really hundreds, if not thousands, of children and families.
What were some of the main sticking points that needed to be sorted out over the last few months?
Well, first of all, who is included in the compensation agreements and what kinds of situations might be covered by compensation, but also how the compensation would unfold. And of course, really grateful to the Indigenous leadership that really focused on making sure that compensation was designed in a way that would not re-traumatize or re-victimize people. Of course, many people sharing experiences about how the original Indigenous residential school payments could often create feelings of victimization for people who applied for those compensations. And so all parties agreed that this should be done in a way that was culturally appropriate, relevant, and respectful. So, you know, again, over the past 6 months, led by and assisted by Murray Sinclair, parties worked really diligently to make sure that we got at an agreement that all parties could feel confident would achieve that compensation, but also do so in a way that was respectful.
So when will people be able to begin applying for that compensation?
So the next steps are that both the federal court and the CHRT have to accept the proposal as signed off by the parties. And once those the proposal is accepted, then compensation can begin to flow. It won't be, as you know, delivered by the federal government, but we are, you know, ready to support that delivery in any way that's needed.
The federal government also promised to pay another $20 billion in program funding, which isn't part of this settlement. Where are negotiations at with that?
So you're right. That's the second, and I think probably equally critical component of the agreements in principle. And I'll just remind viewers, there's two streams. One, the compensation that we just finished talking about, and two, reforming the system of child welfare so that this will never happen again. Now, those conversations continue. They are complex, of course, because they span multiple provinces and territories. And, you know, it's really getting at making sure that the systems in place, including the funding systems in place, will ensure that we never find ourselves again having to compensate for ongoing systemic racism in funding or in care. And so I'm very encouraged by the positive nature of those conversations. They really are, again, being held amongst the parties, including Dr. Blackstock, to make sure that we use every bit of expertise and leverage people's experiences to make sure that those system reforms really are going to result in better care for children and families.
Minister, while we have you here, you're going to be speaking at the Assembly of First Nations Annual General Assembly later this week. Any comment on the current turmoil there at the AFN, an organization that the federal government funds quite generously?
Well, listen, I think every organization has challenging times, and I wish the best to all of the members of AFN as they sort out how to govern themselves. But I will say this, a strong AFN is very important. We have a number of priorities that we're working on together, things like co-developed healthcare legislation, co-developed policing legislation, new clean water legislation, and many, many other things that the AFN is critically important in helping the Government of Canada reform and change, quite frankly, the way that we do business and do it in a more collaborative way with Indigenous people and stakeholders. So I'll be there to have some meetings with different regional chiefs and different partners, and of course speak to the AFN when the time permits.
Minister, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you taking some time. Safe travels.
Thank you very much. Take care, Dennis.